Unlike a movie, TV shows stretch on for hours, and giving attention to every single shot is something that's difficult for even the best directors to do. Most scenes use tried and trusted methods of composing shots to communicate information. Directors and cinematographers resort to these means because it works, and most people won't notice anyway. Except when a director does go that extra mile, the result is unrecognizable. This is where Severance comes in. The show doesn't do anything extraordinary. You'll see all the typical shots you see in any other show, but Ben Stiller along with Jessica Leigh tweak these conventions ever so slightly to consistently reinforce important ideas. Whether that's via small trinkets and symbols, the colors on screen, or the wardrobe choices, it's clear to me that the visuals of Severance are painstakingly intentional and undeniably brilliant. This is the very first shot of Severance, Helly laying on the meeting table. And "who are you" is the very first line. This is the perfect way to open for several reasons. Our protagonist Mark is testing Helly's memory of her identity to see if the severance procedure has taken effect. However, the line doubles as an introduction to the foundational theme for the show: identity. Between the innie and the outie versions of the different characters and their misplaced memories, we're forced to reason with what makes a person who they are. Compositionally, Helly is boxed in. The green ring of lumen encircles her, and the curvature of the desk resembles a coffin. This symbolizes the death of Helena Egan, but also the birth of Helly R, the employee that we will soon come to know. This one shot introduces the character that's going to cause our entire narrative to unfold and sets up the inherent conflict between the inside and outside world. The most prominent colors in this shot are blue and green. These cool hues come to represent lumen and the severed floor. Since this is where we'll be spending a lot of time, it makes sense to open with this. But also notice how Helly's red hair is placed closest to the symmetrical center of the frame. Red comes to represent the outside world in Severance, and placing it in the center of the entire scene ignites the conflict between the two worlds from the very get-go. After the title sequence of the show plays out, we see Mark coming out of his car. The clear sky fills up the upper half of the composition. While clear skies are usually representative of joy or positive emotion, here we find a much darker meaning. For one, blue represents lumen, as I had just mentioned, but by juxtaposing the sky with the dark gray of the car windows, makes it seem like Mark is being swallowed by an abyss of darkness, his only escape being lumen. Such a shot carries forward the emotional weight of the scene that precedes it, Mark crying in his car. What one would consider to be a simple shot of somebody getting out of a car is so meticulously framed to create meaning for the viewer. What's even crazier is that when Mark finally enters the Lumen building, we get a wide overhead shot that establishes the environment. The shot is fascinating because it mirrors the shot where we see Helly introduced to us. This does two things. It helps the viewer subconsciously realize that we are in the same place where Helly woke up. And more importantly, it helps us understand that while Mark and Helly might be different in terms of their perspective and experience, they are ultimately the same in terms of their environment, and thus they're in the same situation. They are on the same team. The show does all of this in the first few minutes, without even telling you the names of the characters. This is another shot from the show communicating a similar message. Mark's life is literally and visually split into two halves: the cold and depressing reality of his work at Lumen, and the darkness that he carries due to his wife's passing. The black half of the screen represents the memories he does not have access to, while the other is obviously the reality he's currently situated in. Symbolism aside, virtually cutting off half the screen redirects the viewer's attention directly to Mark. This allows the shot to function practically as well as narratively. The most prevalent framing technique in the show is actually obstruction. We just went over how they do this with Mark, but the technique really extends to all characters and scenes in the show. They use this technique in many ways. A haunting example is the scene where Helly attempts to end her own life. It allows the creators to describe exactly what's going on without explicitly showing it. In the break room, the words that the characters must read are plastered across their faces in perfectly horizontal lines. Visually, this creates a prison that the character is trapped in. And placing the characters behind these words takes away from their humanity, as they're considered secondary to the message that they're supposed to read. Another directorial choice that I found fascinating was this insistence of shooting through windows. We see a shot of Mark through a car window. Initially, I found this redundant because the trees obscure the shot. Except we learn later that trees are a symbol of Mark's wife, Gemma. By obscuring the details of the car, the shot reveals something entirely different. These reflections are actually a deep look into the mental state of Mark, overwhelmed and consumed by the loss of Gemma. If you've ever heard of a panopticon, you'll know that it's one of the most effective methods of keeping surveillance on a large group of prisoners. A singular watchtower is surrounded by numerous prison cells. It's impossible for a guard to observe all of the prisoners at once, but the design of the panopticon keeps its captives in a state of constant paranoia and anxiety. The guard tower could be empty for all they care, but the prisoners would constantly feel as though they're being watched. We see this frightening technique dissolve down to the Department of Macro Data Refinement too. Instead of having a dedicated watchtower, the workers act as the guards here. With just enough space to monitor the person across your desk, everybody is placed in a persistent state of observation, and by extension, paranoia. They can't doze off without their co-workers noticing. Lumen is pitting the workers against each other to further benefit the company, creating their own panopticon of labor, all under the ruse of building a family. Another way this idea of surveillance is represented is through the angle of the camera. Here and there in the show, we see the frame mimic the positioning of a security camera. This cuts off characters at arbitrary points while also continuing to remind us that these characters are being observed. This hallway shot mirrors your average CCTV footage. And this shot and reaction shot seems simple, but a little bit of attention will help you notice the fact that we are seeing Dylan from the perspective of the webcam. Tiny moments like these in the show serve the practical function of capturing the character's emotions or actions while also reminding us of the environment that we are in or that the characters are situated in. Speaking of computers though, the technology and design of most things in The Office has a retro-futuristic spin. We know that the show is set in the future, and yet the severed floor at Lumen goes the extra mile to make its technology feel disconnected from the present day. Tiny details like these really make it so that the innies are kept to their own micro-world of sorts, where ideas from the external world are hidden from them. Not to mention, the design of the OS literally makes it so that these workers are crunching numbers from 9 to 5. This is of course referencing how workers are being further separated from their work, with little to no tangible feedback other than company incentives. We also see a bunch of tiny trinkets that reinforce the same themes. Here we see a cube with Mark's face on it. It's ridiculous to think that Lumen awards employees with heads that are literally severed. Another fascinating employee reward is finger traps. At first I thought this was an odd choice because who would think of a finger trap as a prize? I mean, it's a prank. And the truth is that it's not. It's just another one of Lumen's brainwashing techniques. Even though the finger trap is now seen as a harmless prank, it was once a torture technique for prisoners. The trap is supposed to be a metaphor for solving problems through relaxing and handling situations with grace. It's supposed to build psychological flexibility, something that Lumen could use to keep their employees docile and obedient. Before you say that you've caught all of Severance's little tricks and that you get it, take a look at PD's map. I remember pausing the show and staring at it for minutes because for some odd reason, it felt extremely familiar. And I wasn't really trying to deconstruct what PD meant. Instead, I was trying to deconstruct what the map meant. I know that sounds like the same thing, but hear me out. Why was the map drawn the way that it was? And that's when it hit me. The art style of this map can't be an accident. It's scarily close to the work of Basquiat. If you look on the left, you'll even see Basquiat's iconic crown that's visible in a lot of his paintings. The line quality and energy are undeniably similar. And this makes sense thematically too. Basquiat was a rebellious artist, and PD was clearly ahead of the curve in terms of working against Lumen. As I write the script for this video, I realized that I could go on endlessly about the visuals of Severance. There are so many amazing shots that slip by us that I don't have the time to get into. Whether that's Dylan being sandwiched in between the innie and outie world through these printer paper packets that are in the background, or even this horrifying shot of Grainer confronting Helly in the elevator. The point I'm trying to make is that nearly every shot of Severance is filled to the brim with meaning and detail. And as much as I can try to transcribe that experience for you, the best thing that you can do is watch the show, and if you've seen it already, watch it again. You will notice new details and clues that'll give you several answers, but way more tempting questions. Severance is a masterpiece. I've watched the show more than 3 times in the past few months, and I can't say that I've ever watched a TV show that's this well made. And so if for some reason you've made it to the end of the show without having watched Severance, I implore you to do so as soon as you have the opportunity. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment if you have any suggestions. Any and all support is really appreciated in these early stages of the channel. I really am trying to take this seriously and make this a serious thing. So if you could show any support, that would mean the world to me. But anyway, thank you so much for watching to the end of this video, and I'll see you in the next one.